Hey there. This is that rare case where I'm actually happy there's not chat to my side because I feel like their derision might detract somewhat from the tone of, well, what I'd like to talk about. I'm actually talking to the Trump supporters this evening, so if you're not a Trump supporter, you can leave. Don't worry. I know you're gonna stay anyway, but I have a question for you. Okay, now listen. I'm a socialist. We probably disagree on a lot of very fundamental political issues. I would like to believe that you and I both want what's best for the world. Like we both have a set of moral principles and we're trying to work in favor of that. Neither of us are cackling Saturday morning cartoon villains. Um, so it's in the spirit of that shared interest that I'd like to ask you a couple of questions because I really need to know what will it take for you all to realize that this is insane. Like with the Trump lawsuit stuff, for example. Now, a lot of Republicans believe that the election was stolen, and um, Fox News, most of the mainstream media has completely. I mean, this is like a joke to them. Even Fox News has laughed this out. Even Tucker Carlson, who's very far right, has laughed this out in large part because Tucker Carlson is a Murdoch simp and Murdoch controls the narrative at Fox News. But the point that I'm getting at here is that this charade of Donald Trump secretly winning the election, but the deep state is trying to cover it up, but they didn't cover it up enough to get the Democrats a majority in the Senate or to overturn any of the state legislators or anything like that. Just the deep state is very selectively competent, very selectively incompetent. What is it going to take for you? I'm sorry. I'm concerned as a citizen of this country that Republicans have abandoned democracy. Now, there are some very far right people who watch me who are like, yeah, fuck democracy. And I know, whatever, the Nazis. Okay, but I think most Republicans do believe that they're arbiters of the American, of the American discourse, of American principles. And I need to know because everything that happened on election night corresponded to what we knew was going to happen, where there would be an initial surge of Trump votes because they count the in person votes first. And then the mail in votes would be submitted, depending on state, because every state has its own rules, in batches. And then those mail in votes would mostly be for Biden. And that happened. And there were some polling errors, sure, but it looks like this hasn't even ended up being that close of an election, frankly. Biden beat Trump by a larger margin than Trump beat Hillary in 2016, with by all counts. And with regards to the electoral vote, Trump lost 2016 by 3 million votes. Biden won by 6 million this election. It wasn't that close of an election, certainly not by popular vote. And in spite of this, the Trump administration has persisted in one of the most, what is, from my perspective, aggressive attempts to delegitimize American democracy we've seen in 150 years. And and I understand you've heard this all before, you've heard it all, but I need to know because from my perspective and from the perspective of a lot of Americans, it really does seem like you guys are in a cult and you're running off a conspiracy theory. Because anytime something you don't like happens, it's part of the plan. And anytime something you do like happens, it's definitely part of the plan. So how do you contradict the narrative? Trump and his administration have made a lot of really bold claims outside of court about how they were barred from entering counting places and they had to view them with binoculars from the adjacent building, and how, Dominion voting systems and the ghost of Che Guevara or whatever counted millions of Trump ballots, then flipped them in Germany to Biden and moved them back over in China and Xi Jinping. And they've made a lot of these claims outside of court. And then they enter court and they get blown out. They don't make any of these claims to an actual judge because lying in court is illegal. That's the difference. You can lie in press conferences. You can lie on YouTube. You can lie on Fox News. You can't lie to a judge. You'd be perjuring yourself. Which is why all of their claims, which is why Rudy Giuliani said in one of the many lawsuits that he has failed to move forward, that this is not a fraud case. I have to I really need to know, what will it take for you guys to recognize that this is a charade? Why would Rudy Giuliani admit in a context where it would be illegal for him to lie that it wasn't a fraud case? There are a lot of people who are claiming now after, what's her name? Sidney Powell? After Sidney Powell was kind of sort of let go, never officially part of the team, but they let her be a part of the press conference, and Trump said that she was part of the team, but they actually weren't technically a part of the team, and then they're disavowing her. She was let go, and now there are a lot of Trump supporters, and they're saying, like, oh, this is all part of the plan, you know? Now she's an undercover agent. There are a lot of Trump supporters who are saying, well, the reason why they haven't brought any compelling evidence to court, notice how the narrative changes, by the way. At first, they did have compelling evidence in court, and then they lost 30 lawsuits. And now it's, well, the reason they haven't brought any to court is because they're saving it for the Supreme Court, which is not how that works, okay? The Supreme Court is not the final boss of a video game that you save all your consumables for, you know? You don't do all the lower court stuff with, like, one half of your power level. And then you get up to the Supreme Court and you're like, and now I go even further beyond. Like, you start with the full argument from base one and you keep moving it up with appeals. If you don't start with your best argument, then you're less likely to make it up through appeals. There are some Republicans who have said they don't want the Dems countering their evidence. Well, first of all, if their evidence is correct, why would it matter if the Dems have time to counter it? If the evidence Republicans have of election fraud is correct, then it shouldn't matter if the Democrats know about it. They should be fucked. In fact, at the beginning of a court case, a procedure called discoverability is initiated, where both legal teams exchange all information they have about the case in order to maximize the likelihood that they can make the best possible case. Discoverability is important to a fair judicial system because you do not want either side to be blindsided with pieces of evidence that they didn't have available to them previously. Imagine, for example, like a public defender who's representing just some poor guy, did some crime, whatever. And it's the public defender's legal responsibility to make as best of a case they can for defense, but they don't have anywhere near the same ability as a district attorney and the police department to find either evidence which supports or, doesn't support their case. And for that reason, they rely on the process of discoverability for them to know what case the DA has brought against them, what evidence the state will levy against their client. That's an important part of the process. And all of this put together means this claim that they're saving the good legal evidence for the last hurdle at the Supreme Court is absolute bullshit. Though that is the level of legal competence that I would expect from Trump's legal team at this point, I have to say, because they have been clowning around for quite some time. There is a reason why they have lost every single court case, every single one, including some ones that should make you feel really concerned, by the way, like their attempts to get all of the votes thrown out in some districts in PA, or their constant attempts to initiate recount after recount and accusing others of being anti-democracy for not wanting to subject a state to multiple recounts. Georgia's what? They've said they want 2 recounts in Georgia now? How many? Recounts usually reassign votes by numbers in the 3 digits, 400, 500. Back in Florida, I think it was 537 vote difference that in Florida that would have kicked it, Georgia is by tens of thousands. That's not going to be recounted in any way that affects the outcome of the election. Or that time when they did a recount and found there were more votes for Biden. Whatever. I'm asking you a question, Trump supporters, and I genuinely hope that my fans or whatever share this with their family members or with whatever. What do we need to do to pull you out of this? Okay, like this is an important step in being a rational person. You have to ask yourself, what evidence would it take for you to realize you're wrong? There always has to be a threshold. If there's not, then you're making a faith-based claim. And a lot of religious people, like there's nothing you could do or say to make me not believe in Christ. And okay, fine, we're not talking about that right now. But you're making an evidentiary claim. You're making an argument that there is evidence that there was election fraud. But so far, all that evidence has amounted to is a mountain of failed court cases and the leader of Trump's election fraud legal team saying they're not trying to prove there was any fraud. So you need, there needs to be something that I or somebody could do to indicate to you that you're wrong. There needs to be a threshold. I could do this. I've admitted that I'm wrong all the time on stream. There have been beliefs that I've moved over on, rent control being a really, really classic one. There are plenty of beliefs regarding gender, affirmative action, or all this stuff that I've moved over on because my beliefs, the things I care about, the things I believe in them because I feel as though I have good reason to believe. There's evidence that I can argue for and against, and I'm not saying I'm always right or that I'm perfectly, infallibly correct in how I assign weight to the legitimacy of this evidence, but it is a process. So what can we do? Like, the claims I'm seeing from Trump supporters are deranged. And the ultimate outcome of this, and I hope you realize this, is that right now the Republican Party is anti-democracy. Like, the process that the Trump administration is going through right now, by all, accounts, is illegitimate. Like, they don't have a case for election fraud, but their constant attempts to delegitimize the election in spite of that is an anti-democratic one. The majority of the voters wanted Biden. And that may suck for you. And look, I don't like Biden either, but that's the process. And if you have a legitimate problem with that process, that's fine. But this is not panned out to be a legitimate problem. There's a reason why all these arguments for there being election fraud sound so much more convincing when it's being given to you by YouTubers or Facebook clips of Fox News videos or by Candace Owens talking into a webcam for 90 seconds. That's when it sounds really compelling. But then when things get into the courtroom, all of a sudden, wet spaghetti falling out of the pockets. They have no idea what they're talking about. There's a reason for that. It's because it's not illegal to lie to you on YouTube. It's not illegal. They can just lie to you and you can believe it. You can eat it up. And then I'm in this position like, well, fuck, well, now what do I say to you? Like, I don't want to spend the next 4 years arguing with Republicans who are living in a different version of the reality that I live in. A version of reality where those court cases and everything were all destroyed by the deep state, even though Trump has appointed literally hundreds of federal judges with very conservative biases. Um, I don't want to argue with Republicans over nonsense culture war bullshit, like whether or not the left is trying to take away Thanksgiving. I want to talk about issues that meaningfully affect my life, your life, everyone's life, issues of policy, issues of common discourse. But I can't do that as long as I feel Republicans live in a different reality. So I'm asking you this question, and I'm asking you from a YouTube video, so I'm not going to hear your answer. I'll read the comment section, but I really genuinely want to know. I'm begging you, okay? I need to know, what can we do to get you off this path? Okay. What can I specifically do? You know what? No, specific question. Okay. Specific question. What can I talk about that you will find interesting? Like, I'm a socialist, right? So we disagree on a lot. And I imagine that a lot of my conclusions are ones you would disagree with, though maybe not as much as you might expect. But with that being said, there must be issues you're curious about, like you feel we don't talk about it. I see that claim all the time. The left won't talk about X, the left won't talk about Y. And usually the reason for that is because we've already talked about it and we're over it. A lot of the things I see right-leaning people say we don't want to talk about are either utterly irrelevant, meaningless culture war bullshit, like one news report about one incident where like a black guy was mean to a white guy and like the left doesn't want to talk about this, it disproves their narrative. No, it doesn't. It's just not like something substantive, please. Or a lot of the other things that I see conservatives say we don't want to talk about are like conspiracy theories. Like the left doesn't want to talk about like Obamagate or whatever. But having looked through all these issues, can we talk about something that's going to like meaningfully affect your kids or something like that? Could we focus on issues that affect your lives and not ones which Republicans tell you will affect your lives? This is a really good litmus test, by the way. What you're hearing about, how much does it actually affect your life? Like take BLM, for example. People will say that cities are being burnt down. How much is BLM, like the riots or whatever, like the very proportionally small amount of rioting and looting and arson? How much has that really affected your life? If you actually look all over the country where this has affected people, most of it, most of the direct effect was pretty fucking overstated for a historic civil rights movement that involved tens of millions of people. I'm not saying it was nothing. I'm just saying, like, some shops boarded up windows. There was property damage, which should be, brought to restitution. But like, did this destroy the country? I'll tell you what is destroying the country. It's COVID. But Republicans don't want to talk about COVID. Or when they do, they want to talk about Cuomo or they want to talk about China. But they don't want to talk about like real policies, or why America is doing worse than like everywhere else on earth. Like, this country is the wealthiest country and we're doing worse than everybody else. Like, there has to be a reason for that, right? You know, Pence is trying to go on vacation right now, leader of the COVID response team. Right now, right at the moment of recording, right now on the 23rd of November, 2:22 p.m. That's auspicious. Pence is he's trying to abandon his responsibilities during the highest peak of COVID we've ever seen since the beginning of the pandemic. Like, that's a real thing. And that's going to lead to real fatal consequences for a lot of people. So that's what I want to see, okay? Can we talk about an issue that really matters, like actually affects people? Because I see what conservatives get riled up about. Sometimes it's legit, and sometimes I feel like I don't even know what the fuck you people are talking about. Like we live in two different worlds. I don't know. Well, it might be a little bit overly optimistic of me to make the assumption that anything I would record here would ever find its way into the feed of conservative. But I do encourage that if you're watching this and you're left leaning, okay, this video is not for you. First of all, it's cultural appropriation. Okay, this is conservative content that you're consuming right now. You need to get the fuck out of here. But before you get the fuck out of here, if you could share this with like a conservative family member or something, because I genuinely want to know. I'm really not trying to come off as patronizing here. I've argued with a lot of conservatives. Like, it's kind of my job to, or at least to deal with conservative arguments. And I just don't feel like I'm living in the same reality as these people. It doesn't feel like two separate sides with different ideas on how to fix a collective problem. It feels like both sides are, are fairly. I don't like the Democrats, okay? I don't think the Democrats are like great arbiters of what is and isn't good for this country, but they're like markedly better from my perspective than the Republicans. Like, the Democrats at least care about real issues. You go to a Biden town hall, somebody asks him a question, he'll answer the question. He has like responses, you know, when he's not stuttering or brain farting or whatever. But you go to a Trump town hall and like every single fucking question, all he does is brag about how great he is or complain that the mainstream media is mean to him. He'll ignore questions. He has like two talking points, COVID-19, like just talk about China. It's like a completely different world. And people watch that and they clap. And I don't know, man. It's like, I mean, do you want the country to survive or I'm rambling. All right, get